Welcome back to the Last Boy Scouts Survival and Bushcraft. Today we're going to be finishing up our shelter. We've already completed the tripod as we showed in our last video, and today we're going to take our World War II era, Vietnam era pup tent and connecting it to make a plow point style shelter. So stay tuned, you're going to learn something. Before we go ahead and get the shelter set up, I'm gonna lay down the ground layer. Now this ground or base layer is simply a canvas tarp that is going to protect us from any ground moisture or condensation that might attempt to penetrate through whatever we want to keep on our ground layer so that we can stay dry. All right, this next portion is gonna be attaching the tent itself to the tripod. And I'm gonna show you how to do that with that toggle we made to assist with our frapping and our lashing, and just a piece of cordage. All right, so what I'm gonna do is basically I'm gonna take the cordage, and like your quick deploy ridge lines, I've already pre-tied just 2 half hitches, and we're gonna take our toggle, put it through, cinch it up. Now this knot, as I explained in our 3 knots in 3 minutes or less, this is not going to be a solid knot where basically it slips. It will slip forward, it will slip back, but you cinch it on something and add weight, pressure, tautness against it, it's not going nowhere. So basically I'm gonna run this line through the top portion of the pup tent, through the grommets, and we're going to have the tent sit on this toggle, and then I'm going to affix the cordage to the top and let it hang. And then from there, we will fasten and adjust the sides of the tent with the tent pegs that I have and go from there. All right, you see these grommets right here? What traditionally comes with this tent is some poles with some metal, I don't know what you want to call them, toggles that are stuck within the inside of them, points, toggle, whatever. And basically those come up through here to hold the tent up. But we are going to improvise, adapt, and overcome, and use an ulterior method to affix this to our tripod. Now, affixing this knot to here, you can basically wrap it around, tie whatever knot you want to tie. I can go again with the 2 half hitches, basically up and around through, underneath, back through, bring them together, cinch it up, let it hang. Okay, so I can do that. Wrap the extra cordage around so it's not in anybody's way. Come back to it if I want it later. Or another method of doing this is I could have tied the loop in advance and just slip the loop over the top of this log, this pole, whatever you want to call it, right here. That's just an additional option that you have available to you. Now, if you notice, there's a gap here between the top of my tripod and here, and it's just sitting, it's hanging. Okay, if I don't like this, right, I can always untie it, readjust the height, the length, or another method without having to go through all that is I can simply wrap my toggle around and around, put a half hitch on the end of it, and adjust it that way for the height, or not, however you want to do it. Now, sometimes you may not have a stake that will fit inside the grommets that are built into a tarp. One thing you can do to overcome this obstacle is you can take a piece of cordage and basically tie a fisherman's knot or some sort of looping knot, and it actually adds as an extender, and you have a wider berth to be able to put your tent stakes in, as opposed to them not being able to fit inside your pre-made grommets. All right, our shelter is up finally, but I'm not 100% pleased with the aesthetics. There are parts that are wrinkled, there are parts that are all bunched up. So I'm gonna show you a couple tips that you can utilize in this same situation to help create tautness or aesthetically pleasing look of your shelter build. All right, one of the first things that you may have noticed in that walk around of the shelter is that one side is particularly taut, more even, crisp, all the wrinkles out, whatnot, however you want to word it. And the other side is all bunched up, wrinkled, doesn't look as neat and nice as the other side. Well, on that side that's a little bit more taut, one thing that I've done and that you can do is basically I've taken up the bunched up portions and I've rolled them up underneath, and it's created a more flat, taut sheet in my shelter. Let me show you what I'm gonna do to fix the other side. And on this side, with the assistance of an additional stake and some cordage, I'm going to take this extra bunched up sheet, twist it up a bunch of times as to create a more tightened sheet, right? And then I'm going to create a sheet bend. So basically I'm going to bend the sheet, right? And then I'm going to take the cordage and do a sheet bend knot to basically tie up all this portion right here, create an extension, and bury a stake on the opposite end to create tautness in this line. Now let me show you how to do that. So upon twisting up the sheet and giving it enough pliability to where it can bend, I'm gonna create a bite out of it, right? And then basically the cordage is gonna come in. Let me give myself enough. I'm gonna go around the sheet couple times. Let's see, let's give myself some more cordage. I want this to be a good one. All right. So I'm gonna go around the sheet a couple times. And then back through that first loop around. And this would be considered a double sheet bend. And you can go loop it around as many times as you need to, cinch it up as tight and as taut as you need to, right? And as for your stake, there's a couple things you can do. You can do a taut line hitch, as we have previously instructed in the 3 knots in 3 minutes or less original video, or you can do what's called an overhand slip knot, or when combined with a tent peg or whatever you want to call this, post, toggle, call it a marlin spike. All right, so basically what you're going to do is you're going to grab your cordage, give it a little bit of leeway, and you're going to create a loop. You're going to reach in with your fingers, pull another loop out, which is going to kind of slip around, right? Quickly take your tent peg, post, toggle, right? Pull back on it, and it's going to bite down and create tension in that knot, right? That will not slip. Now, if you release this and you pull through, it's a quick release slip knot, right? That's why it's called a slip knot, because it slips through, making it easy to disassemble. So once again, slip through, grab the cordage, pull through, create tension, stick my tent peg in, create tension, tautness, pull down, and voila, we fixed an issue with our tent. that I have about this newly constructed shelter is I have it right next to my fireplace. If during the cold season I wanted to take advantage of the heat coming from my fireplace, I could create a barrier on the backside which would in essence reflect the heat back into me inside my shelter, as well as on the walls of my shelter, reflecting it back down on me as I sleep. Another excellent feature about this tent that I love is if I so choose during whatever season, I could enclose and encase myself within the shelter, giving myself additional safety, security, shelter from wind, wet, cold, or privacy, or not. I can do one flap, 2 flaps, or keep it open as I prefer. All right. Another piece of my shelter, which is essential, is part of my overall security, protection from the elements, and comfort in part of my sleep system, is my insulation barrier. Now, what I have basically done is I took a safety blanket or moving blanket or whatever you want to call this bad boy that I purchased at Harbor Freight, and I use this rather than a foam insulation pad or one of those air mattresses. And I didn't grow up utilizing any of those anyways. I typically just use my tarp in my sleeping bag and maybe occasionally an insulation layer of a wool blanket underneath my sleeping bag. And that just to protect me from the cold underneath, and sometimes that condensation that would come up, that wool blanket would stop it. So this acts as that additional barrier of insulation. One additional thing I'd like to point out is there are tiny holes within this tarp. So no matter what I was able to do to attempt to weatherproof this bad boy, it'd still leak. I would probably include some sort of tarp system as a rain fly. That's just my 2 cents, not something that you have to do, but I'd highly recommend it. I'd like to thank you all for tuning into this episode of The Last Boy Scouts Survival in Bushcraft. I hope you enjoyed what you saw and that you learned something along the way. If you like what you see, please hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button to tune into more of our adventures as they come. And be sure to share this with family members, friends, or those that you think might be interested in this type of thing. So until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant. Knowledge is your weapon. Be prepared.